What do Spider-Man 2, Driver San Francisco, and Sekiro have in common? If you are confused by this question, welcome to the club, because so am I. You see, if we read descriptions of either of these three completely unrelated and very different from each other games, we see this. A game where you swing from linear mission to linear mission with limited interactivity in its open world, with stealth and group combat being the main gameplay elements. A game where you are a ghost that jumps from car to car in order to complete driving-related missions like races and police chases. A game with a focus on stealth and one-on-one combat in an interconnected world, but isn't open world. Somehow, we have reached a point where all three of these are labeled action-adventure. And it's not only these three very uncomparable games. A game with a focus on open-world sandbox, driving, and a lot of shooting. A game where you shoot in third person and stealth from time to time, following 100% linear levels with mild platforming. A game where you constantly fight enemies with swords and guns in 100% linear levels with intense boss battles. A co-op game where you shoot zombies and monsters in linear level segments. Do you see the issue? How are all of these supposed to be action adventures? How does that make sense? You could argue that they have all action in them, and you can argue that you go on an adventure in all of them, but I would then argue that you are describing nearly every action game in existence. Video game genres are usually defined by their game design focus and gameplay elements, not their theme. So you would think defining game genres should be pretty easy, right? But it seems to be really hard these days for some people to categorize games. The genre marker of action-adventure especially basically lost all its meaning. In this day and age, it seems to me that action-adventure very much is just the miscellaneous section of the gaming industry. If you can't think of a genre definition, just slap action-adventure in your review or wiki article and be done with it. You might ask how this is in any way important. Well, imagine you hear a song on the radio, and it's a type of music you aren't quite familiar with. It sounds similar to some music you know, but there's a distinct difference there, and you can't quite describe what the difference is. So you ask someone else what genre this is, and they give you the wrong genre. Now you are looking for songs in a genre that is completely different to the genre of the song you originally liked, which makes it harder for you to find things that you like. So a genre definition helps you find games that you like. This is why I think genre labels can be very important. If you like one type of game and you want to look for more of that type of game, it sucks that you have to jump through hoops to find something similar. We are slowly starting to see the same happening to Souls-like, I think. At least these falsely labeled Souls-likes are often similar to actual Souls-likes. But what exactly is the similarity between GTA 5 and Sekiro, or Uncharted 3 and Driver San Francisco? The answer is nothing, or very little outside of superficial similarities. Because in my opinion, none of the games I've shown so far that are labeled action adventures are action adventures. None of them. Not one. Uncharted 3 does have action adventure influences and comes closest to being one. But even there, I would say, the action-adventure elements are so slight that calling it an action-adventure would be like calling Dimmu Borgir pop rock, because pop rock bands often have electric guitars and often use 4/4 time signature, just like Dimmu Borgir. Basically, just because a game has elements from other genres sprinkled on top doesn't mean it makes it part of the genre, because if that were the case, nearly all AAA games these days would be role-playing games, as every damn game these days needs a skill tree and small stat-changing elements. So, what are action adventures then? To me, this is very easy to answer. All you have to do is look into the past, see how these games have evolved and what they have evolved from. And by the end, I can show you a very easy and straightforward definition of the genre. These are the grandfathers of action-adventure games, text adventures. A genre which is heavily limited and therefore defined by the possibilities of its technology. In a text adventure, all you can do is read the description on screen and type in a command to interact with the world that is described to you in plain text. By typing in commands, you ask for descriptions of the current spot you are at, to which the game might tell you that you are in a living room. It will tell you what you see in the room and which ways you can go. By entering further commands, you can interact with the items and objects in the room. You can take objects and add them into your inventory. Or you can interact with objects in different ways, like moving them or opening them, for example. Doing so might reveal new paths or new objects, which you need in order to continue your adventure. Here is Sorg. I went up a flight of stairs, but everything is dark and I can't see anything. So I go back down, go into another room, look around and find a lantern, which I then take, go back up the stairs, and then turn on, which reveals the environment to me. I just solved a simple early game puzzle that the environment that I'm in gave me. I solved the puzzle by navigating the unknown environment and using objects I found in it. Combat functions much the same. I come across a troll, and I found a sword earlier, so I use my sword to attack the troll and defeat him. This isn't so much combat as it is another environmental puzzle I'm solving by using an item I found. Now we can sum up the core mechanics and design focus of text adventures like Sorg, which was one of the defining games of the genre. Navigating through unknown environments, interacting with the environment to reveal items and paths, collecting items that help you progress by sometimes giving abilities, like attacking with a sword you found, gliding with a rope you found, etc. Solving environmental puzzles by using items and abilities, reading text descriptions, and interacting/moving through typing text. That is a text adventure. It was an inevitable evolution to add graphics to the genre. Pure text descriptions have the advantage that you can use your own imagination to create an image of the game world in your mind that is unique to you. Adding graphics to this takes a bit of that away. Although with these old games you still needed a lot of imagination to fill in the blanks. The immediate advantage of having graphics is that it's way easier to travel the world, as keeping yourself oriented is way easier. In text adventures, you often were better off drawing your own maps and taking extensive notes in order to not get lost. In this evolved form called graphics adventure, this isn't really necessary anymore. So graphics adventures are text adventures with added graphics. A quite simple definition we can now make because we already defined what a text adventure is. However, some graphics adventures did mix up elements a bit. Here is Space Quest, for example. In text adventures, we established that you move by typing in text. This is not necessary in this graphics adventure. In graphics adventures, you can often move your character by directly controlling them. So no need to say go north or go west. But generally speaking, you still interact by typing text. So I can go up to this computer here, type in to look at it, and then interact with it by typing in look at screen. So while I have to move with the arrow keys on my keyboard, I still have to type in every action I want to make besides that. Some graphics adventure games, however, simply added illustrations on top of the text descriptions, but you still had to move and interact both by typing. These often were graphics adventure remakes or remasters, or whatever you want to call these, of what was previously a text adventure, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which originally was a pure text adventure but got re-releases with added graphics. Although these graphical remakes usually didn't do much with the graphics, just some related illustrations of your current location, you were still mostly reliant on text descriptions of what was around you. Now we can easily define graphics adventure as well. We just take our text adventure definition, remove the bottom 2 points, and then adjust them for graphics adventures. The real mainstream breakthrough of the adventure genre happened with an arguably severely simplified evolution of graphics adventures, the point-and-click adventure genre. Point-and-click adventures get their name from the main and often only form of interaction with the game world, pointing and clicking at things. And even though Lucasfilm Games' SCUM system did have a plethora of commands, the older the genre got, the simpler the commands got. At first, you had all these commands here, which you could try on every object and character in the game. You basically built a sentence by clicking on things, while later games heavily streamlined this to often only 2 or 3 ways to interact, which were somewhat context sensitive, so you could only talk or walk to people and not try to push or pull on them anymore. However, even in scum-based games, like Monkey Island 2 here, every object and person you point at has a suggested standard interaction. Left click will always make you warp to the point you are clicking at, but right click is mapped to whatever the highlighted suggestion below is. So on characters that is always the talk command, and on most objects it will be the look command. So this streamlines the inputs a lot as well, and as you saw, moving around the environment was now also done by clicking on the spot, door or pathway you want to go to or interact with. This arguably allowed for more interaction points per screen compared to graphics adventures, where you had to slowly walk up to a specific point to try to interact with them, because interacting became so much faster, as the only speed limitation you now had was how fast you can move your mouse cursor across the screen to scan for interactive elements. So point-and-click adventure is once again very easy to define thanks to our previous definitions of text and graphics adventures. The jump from text to graphics adventure was that you could now see your environment, and that you could often move your character directly by using the arrow keys. And now the jump from graphics adventure to point-and-click adventure removes the need to type text, and interacting is now done only by clicking your mouse on commands and objects/characters. But the first four and arguably most important elements stayed the same the entire time. Essentially, the main changes are how you interact with the game world. So now we have text adventures, graphics adventures, and point-and-click adventures. They all look remarkably similar, don't they? And of course they do. They are all adventure games. By taking away the differences, we can now define what an adventure is, because as I said at the beginning of the video, game genres are defined by design focus and gameplay elements. The names that genres got are not always to be taken literally, as taking adventure literally would again mean that almost all games are adventure games, which is obviously not true and would make the entire genre marker useless. So the first four elements are the ones that all three of these have in common and are unchanged. So we can now say that an adventure is a game where the game design focuses on navigating through unknown environments, interacting with the environment to reveal items and paths, collecting items that help you progress, solving environmental puzzles by using the abilities and items. All that is missing now is So, what does action mean in the realm of video game genres? Action is very easy to define. An action game, by the original definition during the early days of gaming, is any game where real-time inputs are used to test your motor skills. That's it. The moment you need to have good timing and skill to avoid enemies, attack enemies, jump over gaps, or avoid traps, it is an action game by the original definition. Since action is now way too broad of a term in the modern era of games, where basically 99% of games are action games by that definition, now the action prefix is usually used to emphasize that a game is combat heavy. But originally it was simply a genre description to make sure you know that motor skills are needed to beat the game, as opposed to pure puzzle or adventure games, where you basically never needed any timing or any other motor skills to finish the game. In a non-action game, all you needed was your intelligence and knowledge. So now we have the definition of adventure and the definition of action in context of game design. Combine them and we have the genre of action adventure. It's simple maths really, just simple addition. And with the genre now defined, we look at actual action adventures. Adventure on the Atari 2600 is the very first action adventure, and you will find it checks all the boxes of our definition. This was the entire game, by the way, if you play on easy, aka difficulty 1. Difficulty 2 and 3 add some additional stuff like random item locations, which can in some cases softlock the game and make it unbeatable. Yeah, this game is pretty meh, but it did a lot with the little hardware capabilities it had available. I mean, this is supposed to be a sword, and these are dragons. This here is a quote-unquote bridge, which you can use to go through walls. I guess this is water then, and not walls, but the manual calls them walls. arguably the first actual good action-adventure game. Partly because the technology finally allowed for games like these to work well, thanks to the NES's super powerful 8-bit architecture. A game that anyone can still play today and have fun with. Zelda easily ticks our boxes. We are traversing, we find items, we use the found items to interact with the environment, solve puzzles, we directly control our character, and our skills are tested with enemies and hazards to dodge. Metroid arguably created the first subgenre of action-adventure games. We now call these type of action-adventure games Metroidvania, but that name only came to be after Symphony of the Night shifted the Castlevania series into a direction that took inspiration from Metroid, which also means that the Metroidvania subgenre can have RPG elements, which were part of Symphony of the Night, but they don't have to. The Metroidvania subgenre did not necessarily add any gameplay elements, but it shifted the focus from straightforward dungeons and puzzle solving to a stronger emphasis on traversal. The entire game world becomes one big puzzle in a way. As you acquire new items that give you new abilities, you have to navigate back to previously visited parts of the game world in order to now use the newfound items and abilities that came with them to get up to, into, or open up new paths. So the puzzle element here is mainly figuring out where you can use your newfound abilities in ways to open up new paths in order to progress, and then rinse and repeat. This is why it's a subgenre of action-adventure and not a big genre jump. No new elements are added, but you switch the focus to traversal/wayfinding and change the concept of the puzzle element to supplement this new focus.
Resident Evil.
Resident Evil is usually called a survival horror game. Horror, however, isn't a game genre. It's a theme, and themes are not genres in gaming, because, as we established, game genres are defined by the game design focus and gameplay elements. Horror isn't a game design element or gameplay element, it's a theming element. Survival, however, is a valid genre descriptor. The survival elements in Resident Evil are 1. The limited resources as ammunition, heal items, and even the amount of ink ribbons which you need in order to save the game are strictly limited. Once they are all used up, you can't get any more of them. And 2, the inventory management, as you have to decide which items to store in your box and which items to bring with you in your limited inventory space. If you die, you are game over and have to load your last save file, so staying alive and managing your items is vital. This is where the survival genre prefix comes from. But, as I said, I think survival horror is a terrible genre definition. Resident Evil, in reality, is a survival action-adventure. The adventure elements in Resident Evil are extremely old school as well. If you took away the action elements, you could almost turn the entire game into a text adventure without much trouble. The puzzles are very reminiscent of early text and graphics adventures. You find a lighter, you use the lighter. You find a key, you use the key. You find notes to a piano piece, and you play the piano using the music sheet. If we look at all these elements, it's pretty self-explanatory why Resident Evil is an adventure game, why it is an action game, and why it's a survival game, a survival action-adventure. Well, that list of games just now, in combination with the text, graphics, point-and-click, and action-adventure games, sounded way more like one cohesive family of games than the ones I began the video with, don't they? They aren't going from fighting through linear levels and defeating massive bosses to suddenly driving around while possessing people in their cars, which game reviewers, journalists, and Wikipedia authors would group into a single genre. With the games I classified as action-adventures, the biggest differences you see is if you are in an interconnected world or a linear level. But the moment-to-moment gameplay in all of them includes puzzle solving, getting new items and or abilities, and navigating treacherous environments. So I say, make action-adventures mean something again. The batteries of my brain chip run low, so I will leave you now. What do you think? Is my definition of action-adventure superior? Of course it is. Do you even care? Either way, I'm out.